In our last episode, we revisited the Wide Bay region of Queensland, 150 kilometres north of Brisbane. As suggested in the narrative and known by the Yowie connoisseurs, the surrounding areas of the township of Gympie not only hold some of the highest rates of Yowie sightings, but also some of the most dramatic. In our records, we've noticed in the past the Wide Bay Burnett region of Australia has some of the most aggressive encounters in the country. Just to the north of Gympie, there's been a rise in Yowie sightings along the coast between Maryborough and Bundaberg. Interestingly, not all sightings are on the Australian mainland. Yowie activity has been reported to the AYR on islands not far from the coast by both Indigenous and white people. But how do they get there? And where did they go? Phillip Island, Victoria, Bud's Island, also known as Barclays Island, Bateman's Bay, New South Wales, Oxley Island, just out of Taree, Bribie Island, Queensland, and even Palm Islands, just above Townsville. Off the coast, northeast of Gympie and Tincan Bay, and to the east of Maryborough, is another island known as K'gari, in the language of the Bachelor people, which means paradise. It was here in 1836 where a ship by the name of the Stirling Castle was hulled on coral with 18 people aboard. Notably, among the crew was James Fraser and his pregnant wife Eliza, who managed to make it to the sandy island in a leaking lifeboat. Shortly after, Captain James Fraser, aged 57, and some of the members of the crew were reportedly speared to death by the local Aboriginals, and Eliza lost the baby upon birth. While enslaved among the Indigenous community, Eliza Fraser was rescued 6 weeks later by an escaped convict named John Graham, who had lived in the region for 6 years and spoke the local language. She soon left for England, where she made a name for herself by telling sensational stories of cannibalism, torture and murder, most of which were later discredited. She later died in a horse carriage accident in Melbourne, 1858, aged 60. It's here I'll leave you with Sarah Bignell as I say, welcome to Fraser Island.
Was reading over your report and I realised that we don't have an audio report. We haven't recorded a call with you, and it sounds like the most frightening, incredible encounter on Fraser Island.
Something you wouldn't forget.
Start from the beginning of the story and just tell me in as much detail as you remember, and then I might ask you some follow-up questions after that.
We were staying at Fraser Island, Wongay Creek. Been going up one end far away from camp. On the way back, we heard footsteps mimicking our footsteps in the bush, in the tree line. This might be half an hour or so before we actually saw the thing. We stopped and yelled out, "Is someone there?" We're at these rocks. We smelled this disgusting smell, and what we were trying to do was find out the source of the smell. So we were sort of speculating what it was. It was very strong, pungent smell. It was disgusting. We were just thinking, what the hell is this? And we're trying to find out what it was. Then we heard a little noise. We looked straight up at the source of the noise, and there was this little, what looked like a little monkey sitting up on the branch in the tree, the branch shutting out in front of us and sort of to our right just a little bit. We're looking at that and sort of discussing it. There's no monkeys on Australia. What is it? Like a little bloke. And we're sort of looking at it. Then it moved out to our left along the branch and just kind of smoothed in to the branch, so you couldn't really see it. Another thing, which was probably maybe around our size, a little bit bigger, it stuck its head out from behind the tree trunk, and then it came out in front of us. It jumped up in the air. Then the branch was ripped off. As the branch was being ripped off, another thing appeared there, a bigger thing. And then the branch was just ripped off, thud on the ground, really, really loud. I don't know if I grabbed the branch or swung it. Pretty big thud. And then there was nothing there but this bigger thing that was there, just standing there. It made a squeal, like a yelp when the branch came down. And then it just let out god-awful scream, which turned into a big roar. Just stood there like we were paralysed, just staring at it. And it just went for ages, this roar. And we're just standing at this thing that's roaring at us, it's petrified. As soon as it stopped roaring, we just ran away on an angle back to our camp. Then we looked back and saw the thing running at us on all fours with glowing red eyes. Then it sort of made a beeline on an angle straight for us. I wasn't watching it the whole time that it was running. Then it came behind us in a loop. The next time I saw it coming up beside him, I think it was transitioning from all fours to standing up. And I thought, there's no way we're going to get out of this, you know. Then it came up beside me, making all these sniffing noises and stuff, and expelling air and all this weird stuff. When it was running as well on the all fours, it was making that high-pitched noise, very strange high-pitched noise. Come up behind us, and then it was kind of checking us out, and then it just came right next to me, yelling at me. We sort of ran straight for a while. My friend said, run closer to the water. So we ran a bit closer to the water. So we got maybe a few metres away from it, and it just sort of stayed where it was. Just sort of stayed beside us, kind of monitoring us, guiding us out of its area or whatever it was doing, yelling at us and screaming and making all these sorts of noise, and we'd yell back at it, and then it would get worse. And sometimes it would stop screaming at us, and then it would drop back a little bit. I don't know how many times it dropped back or how far it dropped back. I know there was one time, I was thinking about it the other night, that it must have dropped back a fair bit, because I remember we were both kind of turning around looking at it and got a good look at it. Pull it up again, and then it would go in front of us a bit and then beside us. And I thought, oh, are we dead? Is it going to kill us? We were just sort of running along with this thing beside us, and every now and then have a go at us. Probably ran about 300 metres, and then it tailed off towards the tree line, and it just stayed there for, I don't know, for another 100 metres or so. It still had its glowing red eyes. You can still see its red eyes there, and it sort of all hunched over. And then it took off into the tree line, the bush, and just started smashing through everything, still screaming like a lunatic. We just kept running. Eventually the noise stopped, and we kept jogging back to camp. When it was running beside us, I think it must have been alternating between running sort of hunched over and then maybe running down really low on all fours again. It must have been on all fours or very, very low to the ground. And then it would be up again. You'd say something to it, it'd have a go back at you. Just scream on most horrendous noises. We went back to camp. We told his parents his old man was going to go out and have a look for it. We said, no, don't go out there, whatever you do, John. It's big, it's huge. Went to bed, and we're all lying in the dark, and then we would hear these things talking to each other on each side of the tent. Above me, this really thin, long twig kept on getting dropped on top of the tent, and then it would pull back over and over again. It's really creepy, and we just lay there listening to that. Next day, we went home. I saw it really well. I could see its teeth, and I could see its face. I could still see that in my head now. At the time when this was happening, we could see really well.
Tell me about that smell. You mentioned that it was a really strong, permeating odour.
He said, that smells like rotten eggs. And I said, that's something dead. I said, that's just a sulphur smell. And it was a very thick smell too. When we were running, when it was next to me, you could also smell its smell, like wild animal smell. It had a distinct, unkempt animal smell, but it still had that pungent, funky, rotten, eggy smell or whatever it was. And we could still smell that on us when we got back to the camp.
So you noticed this terrible, disgusting smell. Then you look at this dead tree.
I don't know how tall that branch was that thing was on, but I'm sure it was taller than us. It was probably 6 foot.
And there was something on that branch.
It looked to me like a monkey on the branch, or a little boy. If it was a kid, it would have been only 1 year old or something. Between a baby and a 1 year old, maybe.
It was sitting like with its bottom on the branch and its legs hanging down?
I think its bottom might have been up a little bit, like there might have been space, like just sort of squatting on the branch and just looking at us. He was sitting there looking right at us, and sort of had his arms out front of it. We were actually looking at that for quite a while before anything happened. Enough time to have a discussion about it. Then it started moving off. And then the other thing stuck its head and sort of top of its torso out a little bit. Then it just stood there. Then it jumped up. Larger thing came out of nowhere. I'm not saying it was invisible and disappeared. Where it was, I don't know. But our focus was on the little thing and the tree branch.
The little thing, what colour was it, or was it hard to tell?
It just looked like it was black. We could see clearly that it was a monkey when we knew there was no monkeys. And then when the other thing stuck its head out and then jumped out and stood there, all these thoughts would come into your head trying to rationalise what you were seeing, and it was unfolding very quickly. Maybe the thing that came out behind in the branch was the same thing that chased us. I don't know, but it seemed to me the thing that chased us was a lot bigger than us, and the other thing that just came out behind the trunk was just about our size, or maybe just a little bit bigger.
You think you saw 3 different creatures potentially?
We saw the small thing, then the other thing stuck its head out, which was much bigger than the small thing, and it just looked like a short, stout, rounded off sort of bloke. Very chunky sort of little bloke. And then the other thing, it was there. But somehow it was there. It was just there. And then the other thing was gone. That's the only way I can explain it. It was more in front of us while the others were to our right just slightly. It was right out in front of us.
There's a little creature, what looks like a little monkey, up on a branch of a tree. That creature sort of disappears from view, and then another medium-sized creature is in the same place that the baby was?
The baby was on the branch jutting out to our left.
Was the medium-sized one right next to that tree with...
It was behind the trunk of that tree.
Yes,
it was hiding behind the trunk of that tree. And then it stuck its head out when we couldn't see the little one anymore. Then our attention was drawn to the thing coming out behind the branch. It seems to me that that's how they work. It was like we didn't see any of them at the same time, but for all we know, that big one could have just been standing there the whole time and we just didn't see it.
There were no other features on that medium-sized one?
Really chunky, very stout man. A rounded head too. It didn't have a big pointed head or anything. It just looked like a big rounded, chunky-looking, unathletic sort of bloke.
Then you get this massive, big creature running towards you first on all fours, or did it make the squeal?
No, as soon as the branch was ripped off, it didn't stop screaming. The high-pitched sort of yelp just turned into the big roar, and it just stood there staring at us. It let out the scream, turned into the roar. It just kept going. We just couldn't move. We just stood there staring at it until it stopped screaming, and then we ran. That's when I looked back and I thought, oh, God, it's chasing us on 2 legs, and then it was running on 4.
Tell me a little bit more about the creature's face. Did it have any expression on its face?
It had so many different looks. When it was down low looking up at me, its eyes were red, and it had a sort of, I shouldn't say evil, but it had a really mean look on its face, like a really hateful look. And it was really scrunched up, its face, so it looked more like football shape. My friend, he said it looked like a really old Inuit with folded skin and really wrinkled skin.
Leathered skin.
Very leathered skin. Yeah. If you have some leather and it's old and you haven't looked after it, and they get the scratches on them and you see a little bit of white. It was kind of like that. It's like a dog paw or something. It was like all cracked and there's no pattern to it. It had sort of froggy-looking eyes. Didn't have an ape nose because, they don't have much of a nose. They just sort of have the holes there. It had a bit more of a snouty nose. It was still sort of monkey-like. It wasn't a real human nose, somewhere in between.
Did you see the teeth?
It had fangs, fangy sort of teeth, sharpish-looking teeth. And its mouth opened up really big, really wide. And if you saw it before it opened its mouth, you wouldn't think it could open its mouth that wide. It really opened up.
When it opened up, was that?
Yeah,
when
it screamed right in my face.
Screaming, right.
I saw that very well. The angry look on their face was terrifying, really hateful. But other times it looked just like a big dumb bloke running beside you. When it was away from us, it kind of looked more like a werewolf creature or something. Its posture and the way it looked at us, and you could see the eyes still. And I could see why people would think there was a demon or something like that if they did see it from that distance in the dark. It was like a bloke in a way, but of course covered in hair,
Were the eyes Did they sort of illuminate ahead of them, or were they just glowing in the socket?
No, they're just glowing in the socket. I don't even think it was eye shine. They were very red. Maybe when it got closer, its eyes might have gone a bit more orangey yellow. Mostly it was just like red glowing, like your little light on your TV, a standby light on your TV or something, that little red, that sort of colour.
Did you get a feeling for whether it was male or female, that larger creature?
Definitely male. That's why my friend's mother was laughing when we got back to the tent. That's tackle, you know. Oh, Mum, you should have seen his bloody penis.
For research purposes, though, that's really interesting. So he did see genitals.
Yeah, I did too. I can still see them in my head. He definitely had genitals.
Excuse me, sorry the expression, because you're obviously feeling uncomfortable about it. I don't mind because I've talked about this before. But
it was just a normal tackle there, just in proportion to its body or whatever, and it was kind of just tucked away there. But it looked to me like, no, not exactly like human, but very close.
Was it the same colour skin?
It was grey skin.
You mentioned actually in your email, now that I remember, the hair was a little bit sparse, I should say, in some spots, like it wasn't thick all the way up and down?
I think on its side, and its arms were a bit more sparse, up the top of its arms and side. Around its head, back, legs, it was pretty thick hair. At one point, it was just running right next to me, and somehow it didn't bump into me. It was swinging its arms down its side. I was looking towards it, and I could just see its arm, which was very thick, right next to me, side by side.
How tall do you reckon it was?
The only time I think it was really standing up fully were broad at us, and then when it was sort of running beside us, it was taller than us. It was around 6 foot, just around 6 foot.
And you said it was running in a kind of a weird hunched over way, and that the arms were sort of pumping in a weird way.
It was running in a lot of different ways. It was hunched over, fingers dangling down. It was triple jointed or something, arms bent, and then running, really pumping its arms. Other times it just dangled both of its arms out front. Its running style was very weird. The way it had its fingers down, they have like claws or very long nails. They're extended down below too, because when it's dangling there, and then it's sort of running, pumping its arms like downwards motion.
Pumping in a downwards motion.
Because its fingers are facing down and kind of dangling, it's pumping its arms like that. Other times it was running with its arms out front like it was prowling. I got a really good look at its nails. That was pretty intimidating, you know, long talon sort of things they have. When it was right next to us, it was running like a big kid, just running with its arms down beside it, with its arms kind of just laying down beside it. It was right next to me and it didn't bump me, didn't even touch me. When it was running on all fours, it was sort of like running like a spider would run, really low. I don't know how it could physically run like that, sort of pumping its arms and legs, but really low, just to its stomach, and was low to the ground, and head was up looking at us as it was running. So I don't know how anything could run like that.
You and your mate turned around because you were frightened and angry and screamed at it, and it started screaming at you back?
Out of fear, I guess, just screaming for it to go away, and it would give you a really good blast then. And it was yelling too. It wasn't just screaming, making animalistic grunts. It had its own words or something. It was like rousing at us, telling us off. If you said something like that, it would rouse back at you and really give you a blast, to the point we resigned ourselves to the fact nothing we could do but just run. And once we shut up, it eventually went away.
Have you ever tried to sort of imitate the noise that it made?
High-pitched noises, hissing to really deep noises very quickly. I don't think a human could even mimic it properly. It sounded like to me that it had its own language. It's like, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. Then with high-pitched dits, and then, you know, just garbled crazy stuff. Like, it was really weird. The noise back at the tent, that was very weird too. That was like chirping sort of language, but it was really sinister, and you know, it was like, you know, that sort of weird little. I've never heard anything like that ever. It was a language, or sounded like a language. There's lots of air being expelled as well, and lots of sort of hissing noises as well. It had very wide range of different noises that it was making. I think one noise it was, oof, oof, oof. I think that was from it running, but in between that it was doing all other stuff, and it also seemed to be able to expel air, yell at the same time.
Well, you kept running and it finally left you at some point?
Once it went to the tree line, it was running there for a while, still sort of giving us a serve, running beside the tree line, and then it went into the bush, crashed to the bush for ages. And I should mention too that the stomping that they make, they say about it sounding like an elephant, they really do sound like an elephant running through the bush. The amount of noise from this one thing was just amazing. But I've never been back there. And I won't go camping. I think it's I think it's foolish, to be honest with you. I know it's fun. There is the chance that something could happen, but I just won't do it. No, I don't think I'll ever go camping again.
This isn't our first report of Yowies on Fraser Island. Today's witness describing the posture of the Yowie being in a spider position is something we've heard before. The yelling and expelling air at the same time is something that I witnessed in Ormo in '97. As to the language described, which I experienced in the Pilliga while on expedition in '99. The gibberish and self-illuminating eyes is something we hear quite often. For more information on Yowie-related topics, visit our website, yowiehunters.com. Thanks for listening.